Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade, Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show today. So I have a very close friend of mine on the show today to help us around movement. Dr. Megan Marie Delegas, someone who has been a coach of mine and has really helped me with my movement, because those of you who know me well know I move like a rhino and don't move very well at all. So Megan is the person that's always like, Jade, you better start moving better. And recently I posted a photo of myself squatting. She's like, good job with your with your range of motion has gotten much better on the depth of your squat. But the reason why I wanted to have you on, Megan, is because I think that people, when they think about movement, what they think about is exercise, and they don't realize a lot of times that, and certainly I didn't until getting some of this education from you, they don't realize a lot of times that just moving more doesn't always mean moving better, and can sometimes lead to issues. And so I wanted to have you on to sort of talk about this and just start answering questions about how people can prepare their bodies for movement, how they can move sort of better overall. And of course, in my age range, you know, moving up late 40s, early 50s, it starts to be like, you hear about this all the time, but it really is true, or at least was true for me. I never had any pain, never had any mobility issues really until I hit around 40, and all of a sudden I don't move as well, right? And my body aches in certain places. And you've done a lot of educating me around some of the things I need to be concerned about. So I just wanted to have you on to do that for my audience as well. So welcome, and why don't you just start with letting us all know how you got into this work, and a little bit about, because I know all PTs are not created equal. Physical therapists come in many different forms, and you are sort of unique. I would call you, a functional physical therapist. You work in, I don't know if you would call yourself that, by the way, but you are different than I think what most people would think about, who, they think about, I get injured and that's the only time I go see a physical therapist. You're a little bit different in that. And so why don't you start with sort of just the overview of how to think about these things, and a little bit about your story, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I'm going to try to keep this part concise because I could go off on many tangents, but yes, by degree, I'm a physical therapist, and more specifically an orthopedic physical therapist. So kind of taking out of any sort of hospital rehab setting in that way. I work with the general population, and I would say I like to call myself a more modern physical therapist, because a lot of injuries and pain and symptoms of tightness and aches are usually related to something more than just, I got hit by a car. In fact, most of the people I see, probably 95% of them, don't have a traumatic injury. It's usually something that's kind of developed over time. And a physical therapist is really just trained to kind of get somebody out of pain. But sometimes the pain experience is very complex with somebody. And actually sifting down to the root cause of what's going on is where a lot of PTs actually, are not necessarily not skilled to do. They're skilled to determine red flags, but really to determine what's the cause of someone's symptoms. And so I tend to work with a lot of people who are either lacking in certain mobility or accessing not enough of their mobility. They're feeling really stiff, or they're having pain with specific movements. So my job has always been to kind of look at someone's entire lifestyle, not just their movement in their body, and see what could be contributing. And this is where the functional side comes in, and where I think you can, and I definitely relate, is that there are so many components to somebody's health and energy and efficiency in their body that their pain and their symptoms could be coming from something more holistic or lifestyle related, rather than just this is pain that's coming from running too much because cartilage is degrading, and this is what we need to do. So I've just come at it at a whole different angle on my own to look at things more holistically and actually determine if it's truly an integrity of tissue issue or something deeper.
Okay. Yeah, this is great because from my perspective, when we all think about this and we're listening to Megan sort of educate us here, I think that we need to kind of go back and say, look, Megan is someone who doesn't work necessarily in the hospital setting where someone breaks a leg and comes in and needs to come back. Megan works in a setting where a lot of us are very active and want to stay physically active. And so she's finding these things that are keeping us from, staying physically active. Like for myself, I have a lot of mobility and stability issues that have come from just lots of pressing movements, not enough pulling movements. At least this is the way Megan may correct me on this, but this is the way I see it. It's like I just have a lot of imbalances from the type of exercise that I have done. And I know a lot of you listening to this have some of the same issues. And so I guess let's start. And I'm kind of going to do this selfishly because I'm going to be thinking about myself because Megan, I have a lot of issues around this now, not in my younger years. A lot of you listening to this don't know that, but I'm going to be a little bit selfish and just kind of walk it through almost from my perspective. But I think most of you listening are going to be able to get it. So I'm someone who does have pain. Okay, so I wake up feeling stiff. Oftentimes I have left knee pain that pops up again and again. I'm not someone who is doing all the mobility and stability work and like doing other things. I go to the gym, I hit it hard, probably a little too hard for my age now or whatever, but I think that's perhaps a limiting belief system. But I end up getting a lot of issues. And so if you were going to coach me or someone like me who's very active, who's able to stay active, I don't have any like really current injuries that keep me out of the gym or keeping me on the couch, but I just don't feel like my body moves well. Even to the point where when I bend down to tie my shoes, I feel like I have to like literally stop, squat down, bend over. It just feels like I'm the Tin Man or something like that. And so when you're dealing with someone like me or someone that's dealing with these sort of just general malaise or general just pain in their body or just not moving well, where is the place that you would start or they would start? Is there a way for us to begin assessing ourselves? What is the approach? How should we be sort of thinking about this and determining whether we need professional help or not?
Yeah, that is kind of loaded in the way of like, yeah, you're a functional person. You can move, you can work out, you can do most things in life pretty comfortably. But getting to the nitty gritty of it all, I'm still kind of at that point where you're better off just having someone assess you. But if I wanted to kind of give it an overarching rule of thumb, a lot of injuries and aches and pains are related to a poor stress to recovery ratio. And we're talking on a tissue level and in a holistic level. So you could be somebody who's incredibly stressed emotionally, cognitively at work, and on top of stressing your body at the gym, and you're not recovering well enough, so you're getting that morning malaise. And we have to also look at the other components that go into recovery. It's not just sleep, it's also the food, the nutrition, and the water, and all that stuff, and the type of movement you do day to day. So that's where I usually will start with somebody. So in your case, it would kind of just be like, okay, well, let's look at the movement. Like I generally know that you're a healthy person. This is something you talk and you preach and you practice regularly, right? And so I know for the most part, you know what you need to do. It doesn't mean that we still shouldn't sift through some of it, scrape the surface. But if we're talking about the movement side of things specifically, usually what I like to say, and you might be speaking or asking this selfishly, but you're kind of within a category of people that this could definitely apply to, is a lot of people go to the gym with the idea that it is either to burn calories or get stronger. I love anybody getting stronger. I am a huge proponent of strength. A lot of people don't do enough of it or even in the right context of it. But there's also the type of strength training. Are you doing it with intention to, this is breaking down intention now. Are we doing it just to build strength, maximum power strength, or are you doing it with intention to improve your function and mobility? And what that might mean for your case is when you're doing all those pushing and pulling movements that you were just describing, are you going through the full range of movement of actually pushing through an entire, push through protraction and then a whole retraction type movement, so you're actually getting your shoulder blades to squeeze back to get the entire opening of your chest? Are you actually doing that? I would say many times people are not, either because they're trying to lift heavier or because they just don't know. So the idea is that you can be doing really good stuff at the gym, but could it probably be better that will help you access your range of motion better? Yes. And then the secondary part is, are you recovering well from that? And there are other ways that I would look at that. Some people feel tight because they're not actually rested enough and they're actually weaker versus feeling like they need to stretch. And we've talked about that for you before too.
Yeah. All right. So let me just because there's a lot there. So let me repeat back to you. You just catch me and correct me if you feel like I'm missing something here. So the first thing I heard from you is that for a lot of people like myself, and we're talking about just active people who are dealing with potential issues and aches and pains and general malaise. First thing you said, which is something I preach all the time, and I know you and I do talk about this a lot, is the idea of, yes, if you're going to go out there and push in the gym, but you also need to balance that with recovery. So one big thing it sounds like you are doing and pointing towards is, Jade, all of us listening, any of us who are super active, you can't just go out and push constantly and not recover. And so this has an awful lot to do with the holistic aspects of things, of like, what am I eating? How much am I resting between, workouts and that kind of thing? I guess how I'm structuring, my workouts, and then sleep and all the other things around that. So that's the first thing that you said that I do want to go into with some of that with you to see what are best practices there. But then the other thing that's really interesting and actually reminded me of something you taught me, which I had been doing, but I remember one of the things you said is you were like, even when you walk, you want to like be thinking about like taking full ranges of motion, like a full extension in your leg, basically, and like thinking about like being conscious of the way you're moving in your gait. Like I tend to walk hunched over. I tend not to like extend fully. I'm kind of like, I almost, if I watch myself walk, or I feel like I'm just a rolling ball or something, you know what I mean? So I started doing that because I had some hip pain, and I remember you telling me that, and I started getting very particular, mindful about when I'm taking long walks to really like fully extend on, so that back leg and feel my hip stretch a little bit. Now, a lot of you listening to this probably wouldn't feel that, but you don't have tight hip flexors. And it really helped not just I had never really had much back issues, but one of the major things that helped with is some low back, little stiffness that I had been having. And so this full range of motion thing is important. Another thing that I remember you pointing out to me, and I still have some shoulder issues, but one of the things that you pointed me to is very light, behind the neck presses for full extension and full range of motion of my shoulder joint. And that has made a really big difference as well. The only thing is, and this gets into the psychological aspect for people like me, is that the weight has to be so incredibly light for me to do some of these movements correctly, which brings me to that point that you made about like some people like me just are always trying to go super heavy. But as soon as you start getting specific with some of these movements, like heavy becomes what once was very light. And that was sort of a interesting thing for me. And I'll say one more thing and then see if you agree with what I'm saying. The other thing that I've noticed is for the last 10 years, I've been doing mostly CrossFit type of stuff. So very ballistic types of movement, very, just get the reps done as fast as you can kind of thing. And I know CrossFit is not one thing. Depending on the coach, it's very different. But at least for me, I'm one of these guys, like, let me just get in and get out. Like, let me just move. And as I have moved back a little bit more towards bodybuilding, which does tend to focus a little bit more on full range of motion. Obviously, they do some partial reps and burnouts and stuff like that. that also has made a difference. So if I can sum up what you said to begin with, it sounds like, look, we need to balance rest and recovery. That's crucial. Most people aren't doing that. The other thing is we have to be very intentional in the movements that we're doing, really using full ranges of motion to access all of the muscles. And I would assume you would say to address the balance as well. I want to hear a little bit about, like does it matter that I'm doing all mostly pushing movements? Should I be balancing that with pulling movements? Like, so if I got that first part right, where do we go from there? So I've got the rest and recovery right. I'm starting to do these full ranges of motion. I've lightened my weights a little bit in order to do the full range of motion. What else did I miss there, or would you be adding on to that in terms of the beginning of this conversation?
Yeah, that's always so loaded, and this is why it's so specific to a person. Now, if we're sticking to you a little bit here, we want to, like, if we're just talking about general frameworks, we want 2 to 3 intense days a week. Even 2 is great. Intense meaning your subjective, assessment of intensity. Of course, you can get objective. You can wear heart rate monitors. You can count the weights that you're doing and the reps and the sets. But if we're just talking generally for the public here, you want some assessment of high intensity, which is basically like 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10, subjectively. And you want to do those 2 to 3 times a week. You can do any type of movement, if we're talking about generally, within that kind of intensity. And then, in between, you would do lower intensity. So underneath, below a 5 out of 10. I like to use that with all my clients. Now, that's to keep general frameworks. Your goal is going to be different than Sally's goal. So Sally might have plenty of range of motion. Many women do, and she might just be someone who we need to work on strength. We need to work on heavier weights. I'm not really caring right now if she goes through perfectly full range of motion, but in your context, I would say you've got the basics. So we're talking about the little details here. The dropping down on weight to do that behind the neck press is intentionally very challenging because we are generally weakest at our very end ranges. So that was the one that I picked for you specifically because of your shoulder. That might not be the same for somebody else. So I always like to say rest, recovery, then kind of get to an intensity level of 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10, couple times a week, and then any sort of movement that you enjoy that's lower intensity as well. And then we go into specific goals for you. And that's where I would say it is very hard for someone to know their goals unless they've had that discussion with a professional to sift it out. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but there's a lot of lack of clarity now with the way exercise culture is, that you just go in, you work out really hard, and then you leave and you just burn your calories. But no, it should be that you're going to your strength gym and your workout with an intention to increase and improve your function overall. If we're talking about weight loss and calorie burning, that's your expertise. You know that a lot of that comes from food and diet and all the other stressors of life. So I'm just focusing on the body part.
And honestly, that's why I wanted you here, because part of the thing I think that most people listen to my podcast, they're very much like me, right? It's just like exercise is about metabolic conditioning. It's just burn fat, stimulate the metabolism, so to speak, make it more flexible, like burn calories, elicit these hormonal responses. And the thing is that it's kind of like, a computer where you're just running all these software programs constantly, and all of a sudden you limit your memory and the computer crashes. And I think that's what has happened to my body and begins to happen to other people's bodies. And so, someone like you is essentially saying, look, we have to really pay attention to the integrity of the body. And I like what you said there, because I can imagine, yes, like I am a bigger, stronger guy. Actually, one of the interesting things about that is that because as I get older, you lose some strength. And the goal set is like, do I really need to be squatting 500, 600 pounds now? I mean, it's nice. Do I really need to be benching in the 300s? I don't know. But I would rather, start feeling, much, much, much better as well, and be able to do this sort of over the long run. So it's interesting that you were saying someone has got a lot of mobility already, then you're going to work on strength. But someone like me who does not have the mobility and has been working only on strength, we really need to step back and work on the mobility. Are there other issues there? Like, what are the categories there? So I guess I'm a strength guy who needs more mobility. Someone else is someone who's got mobility and needs more strength. are there a limited number of ones, or is it infinite just based on the person? Like, what would you say are the major sort of things that you run into? Like strong guys like me who just aren't mobile, hypermobile women who aren't strong, or like what are the sort of categories that you typically deal with?
That's a good question. I would say those are the main two. And then if we're getting kind of a little bit deeper, I will work with people on using movement in general for regulating their nervous system. So, for example, someone might say, Meg, when do I stretch? And is it before a workout? Is it after a workout? And I always say, well, what's your intention with stretching? So you're always going to get that from me. Well, what's your intention? Why do you want to work together? So I like to prescribe something like stretching as a way to downregulate the nervous system. If someone like me, I tend to run a little on the anxious side, a little bit more high strung, and at night, the best thing if you struggle with sleep is to do what I would call either yin yoga or a gravity stretch where you just hold a stretch for an extended period of time. That is like a subcategory of someone who needs to use movement for regulating something else in their body, nervous system wise, or to stimulate energy. Someone suffering from a little bit of depression, getting something that will rev them up a little bit more is actually great. Now, take that aside, I would say it is usually like, okay, you're a little weaker, but you're generally mobile. Great, we're going to work on strength first. And mobility is in the industry, it's used for various things. It's used for flexibility. It's used for joints. And I like to use it from the perspective of joints. We are given a certain amount of range of motion at birth. And, every joint is different. Something like the shoulder and the hip has a lot of mobility inherently. Where it gets limited is actually based on the muscle system. And we have some connective tissue like ligaments that keep the shoulder in the joint, for example, and that keeps it safe. But really it's muscle at the end of the day. If you access your full range of motion, it's mostly dictated by muscle. So we have to target the muscle. So that means either strength training or stability-based training at certain ranges that the muscle itself is weakened. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And let me ask you just a little bit of the science here. So when we talk muscle, like some of the things that I feel like I'm just not clear on is muscle is obviously innervated by nerves, and so the brain is controlling that neuromuscular sort of connection. And what's happening there in terms of if I'm someone like when I move my shoulder joint and I can't get my shoulder all the way up without pain. Is this, obviously there's a lot perhaps going on, but we're talking about muscle right now. What is that's keeping the brain or the muscle from accessing certain ranges of motion? Like, why am I in pain in the first place? I oftentimes think of the metabolism in the body as like being a protective system. So is it protecting us, and does it think that it's doing that, and why is it doing that? And then if it is doing that, then what's the way to begin to address that? For example, I think it was you who once told me, I said, I'm cramping up in an area, and I think this was you, it may not have been you, but you were like, well, that's the body feeling like it's not in a safe place. And so you need to teach it to access these places again so it can see that it is safe. And it's something I'm not really clear on. So I don't know if I'm getting even close to what the actual mechanism is, but can you educate us a little bit on what is happening there when the body goes, I'm not giving you that range of motion anymore. I'm going to cause pain in a particular range of motion. I'm not necessarily even talking about injury. I don't have injuries. I just can't access certain things. And when I try, I feel certain degrees of pain, whether it's a really intense stress, whether it's like a pinching sensation in my hip or whatever it is. So I'm just curious, is this what is going on? And is this why you talk so much about full range of motion? Is it really about teaching the neuromuscular connection to be safe in those things? And I'll shut up now and let the expert tell me what is actually going on there.
It's so layered, and it's great. I would say yes. So for example, someone who's feeling chronically tired or a little bit stiff, if we're taking the rest, recovery, and all that stuff out of the picture, and we're just kind of looking at the muscle system, we can argue that from a neuromuscular perspective, there is guarding potentially happening. Some protective mechanism of, hey, I probably don't feel stable here, So I'm either going to limit how often you go there, and over time, that limit is going to probably also decrease your access to that. We don't go from being mobile to immobile overnight unless we have a major injury or a kinked neck, where you kind of just
Yeah.
everything spasms up. That's protective too. But usually that's a gradual thing. And I would say it has to do with a relative weakness. And weakness is also why we will kind of start to guard up and get really stiff. It's meant to be protective. So what I like to tell people is, how do we actually let that guard down? We approach it gently enough where we're tapping on the boundary of that's challenging, but we're not going so far that the body starts to protect even more. And that's a sweet spot. I always tell clients, this could be uncomfortable tomorrow. You could be sore tomorrow. It could make you spasm a little bit. If it doesn't, great. That means we can keep pushing. If it does, then it's information for us. We have to approach this more delicately. It's all you want. And pain itself, as to kind of go on top of that, pain is not necessarily, minus traumatic injuries, pain is not necessarily telling you you have integrity issues at the tissue level. It is just telling you there's stimulus here, there's something happening here, pay attention. And that is, again, very primitive and protective and great. What happens in current society is we kind of tend to ignore it sometimes, or that threshold of pain signaling starts to get a little malfunctioned, and it's either signals too early, it signals too late, and then we either dislocate, or that's usually traumatic related or trauma related. But there's signaling malfunctioning happening. And again, how we fix that is through that same kind of gentle exposure within a certain range where we can push that boundary, and then we can, let that guard down and change the stimulus happening at the brain nerve level. Does that make sense?
Okay, so this is then really helpful, because it really does seem to be true based on what you're saying, is that for someone like me and those of you listening to this who have pain, it's sounding to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if this is wrong, but it's sounding to me like, okay, Jade, like if you have some of these issues, part of the issue is taking a more balanced approach, making sure you're recovering, but also just easing back on the weights a little bit, doing, increased range of motion and easing into these things so the body can figure it out sort of once more. And so this would be the idea of like, okay, so I can do an overhead press with 225 pounds, but I can't lock out and hold it there for a long period of time. And as soon as I try to go behind the neck, which is hard for me in general, I have to literally use just the barbell, like 135. I remember the first time you gave me that thing, and I tried to put 135 on the bar, because that's what I did back in my younger days of bodybuilding. And I was like, I can't even do that, not in the way, because you had me doing, I think, very slow, intentional repetitions. And I fatigued so fast. So even the bar at that point was really tough for me. So it sounds like what you're saying, it's as simple as that, perhaps, as long as there's not some kind of traumatic injury, to regain some of this function. And if that is the case, then what is the best way to do it? Because at least in my case, you gave me this to do at the beginning of my workouts, and it made a pretty big difference even in my strength and performance, like let's say in the military press, which I can do that fine. I can access that range of motion fine. So it's almost like I'm doing this behind the neck press, which I hadn't done in probably 10 years. And now it's translating over to greater strength in my, sort of front press and push press and jerk and those kinds of things. But certainly when I try to go back and access that level of function, I couldn't, except with very low weight. So is it for someone who's just starting this out as simple as that? Pick something that's going to challenge that range of motion, go very light, and begin to consciously, mindfully work those movements as, sort of a warm-up, or are there any other tricks to it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. For me, I like to put things in categories of speed. It's my own personal framework of how I like to simplify things for clients. Someone who's in acute pain will do very long duration isometric holds or static holds, like a plank, for their low back spasm. For someone who's just generally trying to access their mobility and build strength and ranges of motion, you can't go fast. We lose, and that's more from a focus perspective. How it's like going on a balance beam, and then you start to lose your balance, so you run off. You're using momentum to kind of safeguard from the weaknesses that you have. So I like to say to anybody, if it's a squat to get hip range of motion or a shoulder range of motion by pressing, try going at a slower increment of time, anywhere between 3 to 5 seconds up. You can even hold it for 3 to 5 seconds at the top or the bottom, depending on the movement, and then 3 to 5 second down descent, so that you are focusing very mindfully on the movement itself. Now, that's a very simple way to put it, and I would change those ratios depending on the person and if they're experiencing pain. But it also is important that everyone's anatomy is still different. So women tend to be a little bit more mobile. So you're not going to get more range of motion than what your body has inherently given you. So maybe an overhead press behind your back just may be a challenge for you specifically. And it always has since the day you were a kid. And that you're just not going to get much more than that. I would say arguably, though, most people can access more than they probably have right now. So it takes someone perhaps like myself or somebody else who can assess the body to tell you your best positioning for some of these movements too. It's not just doing them slow and mindfully. It's also knowing the anatomy of like, okay, you probably need to have your arms out a little bit. You probably need to have your arms a little bit more narrowly, and your squat stance should be here and someone else's should be there. So that's a factor too.
Yeah, and I think that's huge, because just like we talk about metabolism is different, you're essentially saying anatomy is a little different, and you need a professional to sort of address that. So let's get into something that I think is one of the things you did for me, which was really huge. I remember telling you, and you laughed at me, because I was like, listen, I don't have time to go into the gym, spend an hour warming up, then an hour working out, then an hour cooling down. And one of the things that you pointed me to is you're like, it's really not that complex, right? Like I remember you giving me a little bit of like, look, you do your warm up like this, and you do your warm up with the exercises that you're doing or variations of those. Mm-hmm. And I want to help people sort of understand how this would look, because I think when they hear this, they're probably like, a lot of people are just like, okay, more shit to worry about in my workout now. Now I got to add all this extra stuff in. Yeah. So far in this conversation, we've gotten to this point where it's like, okay, you have your workouts, and you said, look, 2 intense workouts, maybe 3 during the week. And then on those days in between, you're doing any kind of movement that you enjoy sort of more intentionally and more slowly. So let's talk about first these intense workouts, right? And I assume, in this conversation, I know it's varied and there's a lot that goes on here, which is why we're sort of narrowing in, I guess, on strength training, which I think you would agree is the best way to deal with a lot of these strength issues and mobility issues in the first place. But how would I structure my workout? Let's say if I have minimum time, and let's say I don't really want to be in the gym longer than an hour, and me, I don't really want to be in the gym longer than 30 minutes. So for me, when I go in there, what would be the way to do this? Like, let's say I'm going to be doing chest and back, or I'm going to be doing a Metcon that's mostly upper body. How would you say, okay, Jade, so based on that, here's how I want you to warm up, knowing I have shoulder mobility issues and things like that, and here's how I want you to go through your workout, and here's what I might do as a cool down. Like, walk us through how you'd be thinking about that so it can be efficient for us, so we're not just sitting there doing like a 40-minute warm up.
Yes, Look, at the end of the day, this is my industry. I respect it and everything. I can't be bothered to be working out that long either. I don't have the time for it or the bandwidth. That's a byproduct of society's fast-paced everything. So I like to be efficient as all hell, okay? And so that means is if you are doing presses and you're doing some pulls, then we're going to be using those as your warm-up. The industry always says kind of like whatever your sport is, in order to warm up for it, you just do that sport or that activity at lighter intensities and gradually increase the intensity until you're at your working capacity. So if you're doing, presses overhead at 200 pounds, then you're going to warm up with the bar first, and you're going to do the presses with the bar. And then you're going to jump up a few, maybe, add 50 or like 20 to 30 pounds. And then you do the same thing. You just work your way up. And that's a great time to work on your mobility because it's lighter. Like you said, you drop the weight. That's a good time to work on the really slow movements, trying to access mindfully the areas that are tight, and then go up in weight and know that you're gonna challenge yourself and probably not be able to access that same mobility that you just did at the lighter weight. And then you work up to your strength and powerlifting or CrossFit weights that you will do. Same
And how
thing
many
with
repetitions would you say? I'm sorry to interrupt, but like with that, would you say like 5 slow repetitions and gradually working up, or would it be the same amount of repetitions you're going to do, or does it matter?
You'll start probably doing like 5 to 10, depends how fast you're going. 5 slower ones, 10 slightly faster ones at lighter weight. This is just rules of thumb here, as you can tell. I'm not giving you specifics because it's context specific. But as you go up in weight, you're not going to do as many reps. You're not going to just bust out 5 to 10 of 200 if your working max weight is 200 that day. So you're going to go higher volume, lower weight, and slowly go up in those jumps to improve your mobility and just warm up those areas appropriately by going down in total reps. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So let's say I'm going to be doing, I just want to try to give people, and it's also selfish for me, but I also want to give people context. So let's say in my workout, let's say I'm going to do something like, I don't know, let's say I'm a CrossFitter and I'm getting ready to do something like pull-ups. Like one of my favorite workouts is 10 to 1 clean and press with a pretty heavy weight, and pull-ups. Just those two, right? So clean and press, 10 reps, pull-ups, 10 reps. Clean and press 9 reps, pull-ups 9 reps, all the way down to 1. The weight I typically would use for that would be like 185 on the clean and press, and then obviously a body weight pull-up. So a warm-up for that, it's sounding like, I'm just going to guess, and you can correct me here, but like for me, so the warm-up for that would be like what? Like maybe slow deadlifts, maybe slow shoulder presses, and then maybe some kind of a slow pull, and then slowly working up. And so maybe for me, I don't know, I would probably, for time's sake, I'd probably do like, I don't know, maybe 3 sets of that, 5 to 10 reps, like 3 sets each of sort of warming up with these lighter weights, and then slowly get up to my working weight. So maybe set 1 would be like just the bar, for the presses and the deadlifts, and then set 2 might be 135 for the deadlifts and the presses, and then set 3 might be maybe 155 for the presses and the deadlifts. Then obviously now I got my 185 on the bar that I'm going to be using for the weights. Now with pull-ups, that's tough. So would I just be doing, some kind of like pull down, like, or a bent over row, since pull-ups are a really tough movement in general, or would I do something like an eccentric, pull up or something like that? Would that make sense, those choices? Because I feel like, with the clean and press, I'm kind of doing a deadlift anyway. I'm doing that press overhead. And you're saying just make it the warm up. So I'm not really doing things like all these other things, right? I'm just warming up those areas. Now, do you recommend I get on like a bike for 5 minutes just to get the body warm or something like that? But does that sound about right from that perspective?
Yeah, generally, I always like to say do 3 to 5 sets bumping up every time until you get to that working weight. Of course, something that's body weight, you're going to maybe change other variables like, the speed at which you pull up or the eccentric descent down, things like that. And yes, with the deadlift, the same thing. So the part that is generally missing, and I would say is missing in general with workouts, is if you want to kind of be more powerful or recruit more of the muscles, think of muscle recruitment as percentages. You can, if you're lightweight lifting, you're not going to recruit every single muscle fiber in a bicep to lift this water bottle. But if you are lifting a 300-pound something, you're going to recruit everything you got. So that's a whole other discussion on why strength training needs to be catered to a person and their goals. But adding an explosive type of warm-up, like you got to warm up like lightly pedaling on the bike, for example, to get the nervous system to wake up and get some blood flow in there. But doing mini sprints is actually an excellent way to wake up the entire nervous system. So it's a great way to lift heavier because you're actually waking things up versus going into something cold. So I always encourage some variation of, some fast movement, some explosive movement, even really light clean and presses or like snatches, things like that. You really want to, I don't know if you would always do a snatch. It's a very complex movement. But anything that's going to be a little speed-based and power explosive-based is nice to add in there too before you do anything.
So based on that then, so maybe I would go in, do a quick 5 minutes pedaling or rowing, and then go through some of these, 3 sets, let's say, of 5 reps of super slow deadlifts, super slow presses, eccentric pull-ups, and then maybe a couple sets of just very light, clean, explosive cleans and presses. And then I'm getting ready for my workout. And then would you say 5 to 10 minutes is enough for that? Or is it just like, okay, Jade, when you feel ready, right? Like, is it just subjective where I'm like, okay, time to go now. My body feels like I've got the range of motion. I feel it. And I tend to know what that feels like. I'm sure a lot of people listening know. Like there's some days you just go, okay, my body's feeling really good and loose now. Yeah. And I'm ready to go. And I guess with me, you would probably, more specifically since you've worked with me, you'd probably say, on the presses, maybe you want to do the behind the neck presses just to access more of that range of motion since you know me. So let's pivot now into this idea of what am I doing on the day off then right? Because, that's the intense day. Now you're saying on these other days where I'm just doing activity, what would you say like for us if we really want to work on our mobility, knowing that I'm someone that needs that? What would we be doing at that time in general? And I know this is a tough discussion for you to have because it is so, dependent on the person and what activities they're doing. But just in general, like, does this mean like you would prefer something like a yoga or just very light weight training or, what would be your sort of go-tos for mobility type stuff or to keep the body and start to really get the body to learn to move better again?
Yeah, I love these questions and conversations because even though it is context dependent, it is just so important to know intention. Like if you were like, Megan, I just want to be generally fit and I want to feel like I'm kind of getting stronger and I'm moving my body, then CrossFit or high intensity type of workouts a few times a week that really use the full range of motion are great. If you're coming to me for purely, I want to get really, really strong, then I would not recommend CrossFit. That's one thing. And the reason I'm mentioning this now is on your off days, it depends on your goal. If you're someone who is stressed all the time, then I would say I recommend a really nice yoga flow that's not intense and that's guided and that you're also accessing your range of motion and it's going to be really good for you from a mindfulness practice.
So this is gentle yoga, yin yoga. This isn't like power yoga, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're going to do a power yoga because that's all you got, then you're just going to modify the intensity so that lower intensity, you're still falling within that category of 5 and under out of 10. So that's why that framework is generally applicable to anything. And the next thing is also, what do you like to do? I always like to tell people who work with me, we're doing these things based on the goals that you and I have discussed in my evaluation of you, but I will also prescribe movement for you during the week on the off days based on X, Y, Z. If you love to go dancing, go dancing. If you want to improve your mobility further, then maybe you'll do some really small intentional bodybuilding type of movements. If you have a single-sided weakness on a hip, then that's where you're going to do some accessory work. So it's entirely dependent on you and what your goals are and what we discuss your intentions and goals are.
So for someone like me, given I'm a mobility guy, right, you probably, I'm guessing, you and I actually haven't talked about this on my off days. We talked a little bit about my workout stuff, but I would imagine actually maybe you did tell me yoga is probably a really good thing for me. So, but it sounds like based on what you said, on those off days, I'm doing something like yoga, a very gentle yoga flow that's a full body flow, trying to access my whole body. And also then doing very light, full range bodybuilding type of stuff. Sounds like it would be the go-to sort of thing for me. And then obviously if I have more specific issues, I can sort of begin to address them. And I guess the conversation about what you love, right? I'm not someone who wants to go run, like shoot me, right? I just do not want to go run. But for someone who does want to do that stuff, then you're not, it sounds like you're like, yes, go and do that so long as your subjective intensity is on the low side, right? So for me, there's jogging for me, because I'm a big rhino. Like jogging for me, it doesn't matter what pace I go. If I just start jogging, that's a 10 for me. So it's a lot of people don't understand that. Like, go for a jog. I'm like, jog? That might feel like a jog for you, but for me, that feels like a sprint. Like, I won't last 5 minutes jogging down the street with anybody, right? So I like the fact that you're drawing our attention to this idea, but it doesn't sound like you're opposed to any of that kind of stuff, so long as the intensity is less based on the intention that you're trying to do. It's like the 2 to 3 days. That's where you're really making those, intense conditioning jumps based on your intention. And then the other stuff, it sounds like, is just reinforcing that, getting you to move. And it also is, sort of goal oriented, right? Like if you're a healthy person, you're just like, well, yeah, if you want to run and you've got that, and you don't have hip, knees, and other issues, then do that. So to me, this sounds pretty reasonable. Let's just talk, and I know we're kind of running up on time and everything, but let's talk briefly about cool down. So, is that I never do cool downs, and everyone always laughs at it because they're like, maybe that's why I am the way I am. So, do you recommend cool downs, and if so, what do you recommend? Like, is it okay just for me to be like, I'm done, I'm leaving the gym now, or is there something I should be doing briefly as a cool down?
I think it's context. Oh God, it's like repetitive, right? Context. I think that's like the summary of someone who knows it. Yeah. Look, I can talk about all the perfect things in the world, and I don't practice cool downs that much. But you're basically just trying to, if something's really intense and straining on your body, you want to do something that's going to down-regulate the nervous system a little bit. Especially if you're working out at night, especially because you're going to be revved up and you're not going to sleep well, or it's going to take you a while to fall asleep. And not everyone's like that. But I'm keep it simple. Like, go for a walk, go for 5-10 minutes, something that's going to be chill. Do some dynamic stretching and then into some static stretching where you're just holding something for a long time, or pedal it out. But really the idea is think about what the purpose is. It's to get whatever you just did on your body to kind of, I don't like using the word flush out, because what are we flushing out? That's we know we're flushing out things, but the idea is really, can we get that nervous system to relax a little bit? To
calm down.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting point, Megan. So it's like from your, like a lot of people be like, oh, well, you got to stretch the muscle because it's now all of a sudden tight. And you're saying, well, no, the really important thing here is just calm the whole system down, which, does make some sense to me, just from a metabolic perspective, which is sort of my area. Like I'm always like, it's where, I guess is where you and I dovetail, because I'm always like, best thing to do after, a workout is go for a nice long walk. Right. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing, and I don't know, I just want to talk about this, like in terms of soreness, because I know people will ask about this. Like my reading of the research, and I'll ask the expert here, but my reading of the research, there's lots of things you can do: sauna therapy, cold therapies, things like that, and massage. But my reading of the research is the thing that is proven to be the most effective is, again, just more movement, mainly walking. That actually has the best effect on delayed onset muscle soreness and everything else. So not just after the workout perhaps, but like that's the best way to get rid of soreness. Am I right in that, or is there other things to think about there?
Yeah, no, I agree. And to be honest, I haven't even done a lot of reading on the more recent things regarding soreness. I just use it as data points really on what someone's baseline is and how much we pushed on them. So I'm not a performance specific clinician. I will improve someone's overall lifestyle performance, and I'll help their injuries and all that stuff. So if we're going to get into some of that, that's definitely more high level elite sports performance, and that can be touched upon. But you're right, the idea is movement. Like, movement is king. I like to say movement is queen, really. So the idea is that movement is the best thing we could absolutely do. The problem is when we do different types of movements or too much of certain types of movements, and we're not creating a nice harmony in that stress recovery ratio. So your recovery days can absolutely be movement based. And I always tell that to my clients, especially some that have fear around certain movements. It's really just about intensity. So yeah, going for that walk. You can also go for a really light swim, or you can just, go rollerblading. I don't know. It's up to you. It really is a matter of doing the thing that's going to get you moving, that you enjoy.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you just a few questions. I know people are going to be like, I wish you would have asked her this, because there's some of these things are controversial. What do you think about foam rolling, and if you like it, when should it be done? Like, is foam rolling useful? When's it useful? And is it, I just like the way it feels. I sometimes just do it when I wake up in the morning. You know what I mean? But what do you think about foam rolling, and when should it be used?
Yeah, I'm very agnostic about most things. You can do whatever you want. Move. So, but foam rolling, if you're using it to increase your mobility, first and foremost, it's low on the totem pole. So, but it does change stimulus. It actually will, that pressure on the surface of your skin and the muscles are going to communicate to your body. So, the way we want to see it is if we don't have sensors in our body, we put our hand on the stove and we're going to just keep our hand on the stove and burn our hand. The idea is that creating some foam rolling practice isn't bad. It's actually going to wake up the nervous system. If it actually tells our brain that something is happening in that area and now we have to respond. So it's probably going to, quote unquote, wake up the area. It's not going to necessarily make you more mobile, but it might be one of the steps that you do in addition to the more effective things, which is higher intensity movement to warm up the body or to increase the weight strategically when you're trying to get more mobility. But it's not the first thing I would do. It's nice in the evening too if you don't feel like you get revved up from it. Some people do.
Yeah. I really enjoy just the way it feels personally. Yeah. And it's nice to know. Sometimes I like to do it before my workout just to kind of get loose. But I just my favorite time to do it is in the morning, first thing. And would you say, I want to talk a little bit about morning routine because not everybody works out in the morning, but as a physical therapist and sort of, do you recommend that, like for someone like myself or for all of us, should we be waking up in the morning and doing any kind of movement, or is it just simply like for example, this morning, I haven't done this in forever, and you'll be proud of me, but I woke up this morning and went up in San Clemente, and they have this beautiful rooftop deck, and did some gentle yoga sort of flow, and it just felt great first thing in the morning. Sometimes I do melt, other times I do foam rolling. I use a PVC pipe in the morning. I don't always do this, but when I do, I just feel so much better. So, maybe it's just me. Like I imagine, I know you, so you're gonna be like, well, Jade, if it makes you feel good, do it. But I'm wondering, just as general, because I know how you are. You're kind of that way, right? And I'm similar. But just generally for people who want to know, as should there be a movement practice in the morning? And by the way, when I do this for people who are listening, I'm one of these people who's just super efficient with stuff. Sometimes it's literally 3 minutes, right? Of just sometimes I'll do just 2 sun salutations. Other times I'll do a full 10 minutes. Today I did 30 minutes, right? So, but I'm just wondering, what is the importance of that after sleeping all night in whatever positions? Is this something that's important for us or not?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, what's the pace of life that you're experiencing? How is your body recovering? Do you need, you might be someone who just needs a nice warm up and something that's going to wake up the body slowly. Someone might need, regardless if you're going to do something intense in the morning, you still need to kind of wake up the body appropriately and kind of prepare it like we were just talking about with warm ups. I wouldn't say there's an specific rule of thumb unless you're out there trying to perform for something specific for you. Pick what's right for you, what feels good. But if you need to wake up in the morning and you're likely to get the job done and you like intensity in the morning, then that's going to get your body and the cortisol and everything to kind of go elevate and prep you for the day. So
that makes sense. And and part of the thing, I think a lot of people just get out in the sun and walking first thing in the morning if you can. It's just another great warm up. So
that's the best thing, is getting the sunlight.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so final question then is, this goes more into specific issues, right? So this is how does someone, let's say someone who's listening to us has very specific issues. They have, one of the things I asked you about recently is my father has frozen shoulder on both shoulders. It's been like this for a year. And one of the things that I think is problematic is I really feel I'm always shocked that people don't know about physical therapists, and they think, for whatever reason, they think that going to a physical therapist means they have had to have been in a car accident or had some really serious injury. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, I'm no, these, to me, the best professionals to get us moving better and get us out of pain are physical therapists. It amazes me that people still are going, well, I'm going to go to my MD or my chiropractor or my ND or something like this. From my perspective, all those professionals are wonderful. But for me, I go, a good physical therapist, what I would refer to as a functional therapist, like yourself, physical therapist, is who you want to go to. There's different types of physical therapists. There's some that deal with just these traumatic injuries, and then there's those who work with like really helping us just get healthier and move sort of better. So let's say someone's got an injury that doesn't require going to the doctor. Like my dad is like, he's not gonna go see an MD because he knows. He's like, what are they gonna do for my shoulder? He's asking me, who has limited sort of understanding, but there are people listening to this right now who have low back pain, knee pain, ankle pain, shoulder issues, neck stuff that does not require they go to, have surgery. Most of these things, I think, won't involve that and aren't really necessary. Where do they start, and what kind of, where do they even find these types of physical therapists that you are? Because I do think right now in our field, which is why I wanted you on, in the health field, I do think the physical therapy world, the functional physical therapists are the most undervalued, I really do think, group of professionals. Like, they are the ones that can prepare us for movement, that can get us back to moving correctly. And I do feel like they're just incredibly underutilized. I think part of that problem is most people think physical therapy is about people seriously injured in hospitals. So how do we actually find, is there a professional organization or something like that, or that has points people to directions of working with physical therapists like you? What pointers can you give people? Obviously they know you now, so a lot of people, I hope, will be reaching out to you. But how do they know, and where do they find the type of professional like you that's not sort of just the end all, I just broke a leg, now I need to see a physical therapist?
Oh, that's such a loaded question. And I think you can agree that the industry in health it's complex. I would say I like to call myself, and I don't think anyone else says it either, more of a modern physical therapist, where I don't work in the insurance network because if we're just talking about wellness and improving our longevity, while that is considered healthcare, sometimes that's not covered by insurance. So the model of healthcare is really on injuries and any sort of pathology, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm not surprised that people don't quite know that they can go to a PT when they have just thrown out their back instead of going to the ER. And that's no one's fault other than the way the industry is and the way the healthcare field is in America. In terms of finding someone, it's like anything. Shop for the person that you connect with, because if you do not, then you're not going to quite get where you are meant to go. And most of the things with specific injuries, or like your father, for example, there's a mindset that needs to change, and this also comes from us and how we deliver information. But you should be creating a practice of movement. And instead of going to the PT and being told you should be coming here 2 times a week for the next 8 weeks, is really let's actually create a better lifestyle around movement and modify your movement if you are fit and healthy. And that's what I do with people. I work with people long term. Sometimes I see them at frequency, and sometimes I see them once a month. It depends on what their goals are. And so finding someone is not necessarily impossible. Honestly, this is where social media is great. Go to someone's profile, search physical therapy in your area or even in the country, and start to follow them. A really good, I would say, modern clinician is going to be someone who looks like a personal trainer, but they are highly skilled in assessing your body. And so now, for example, when I work with someone, I will assess the body and we will do PT-esque style exercise in our session, but it ends up feeling and looking like personal training, because that's what it really is. It's just what I call specialized personal training. And it's very catered to a person and their, quote unquote imbalances or pains and things like that. So Instagram's a great honestly.
It's funny you say that, because if people have asked me about you, and I go, honestly, working with her is kind of like working with a personal trainer on steroids. Literally, it's personal training. You're getting all those benefits, but you're getting way more because you're getting this doctor level education and very specific to your goal set. And I can give people a little bit of background on what it's like. It's like Megan uses an app, so she's gonna assess you. And then you're going to be, she's going to basically be creating exercises and workouts for you around your specific needs, right? So all of this stuff, like with me with my shoulders, like I'm getting specifically tailored workouts and stuff like that based on my unique limitations and unique strengths and what we're trying to accomplish. And I get to say, yes, I did this workout. I did not. Like Megan knows I'm horrible, so she has to remind me, like, Jade, what the hell, did you not you didn't upload your thing or whatever it was. But it's a really interesting way of practicing now because it's not something, you never have to go see anyone in an office anymore, right? It's completely virtual. But also what's really interesting about the virtual thing, I think a lot of people don't realize this, like virtual nowadays is way more hands-on than what hands-on used to be because you have access almost constantly. Like it's just wonderful. It's like, here's your workouts. Oh, you did your workout. Here's some feedback. Do you have feedback for me? Oh, here's your new workout based on adjustments. And now let's assess again, right? So, okay, now we can see you were assessed like this in the beginning. Now you're doing this. Now we tweak things a little bit. And it's just this beautiful process that I don't think people really quite understand how powerful this is and how tech has changed. That's why I do like the idea of modern PT because I do think tech has changed this tremendously, and it's really it's just really powerful. So obviously that's why I wanted to have you talk to my audience. So one, they have a good quality person to go to, but also just get a little bit of background of some of what we're dealing with. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, how they can get in touch with you, and then any other things you want to just add, any other thoughts or things that you think we missed.
Oh, I don't know. I'm glad we mentioned that it was virtual. I forgot about that. But yeah, that's all virtual. So I do offer consultations for anyone in the United States. But you can find me at meganmariept.com, which is MEGANMARIEPT.com, or honestly, Instagram is where I talk to a lot of people. They inquire there, and it's the same thing, meganmarie_PT. That's a great place.
And just so you guys know, Megan is incredibly, and you also find like she has an incredible network as well. She is just incredibly generous on social media in her education.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really nice, right, that we can reach. You're an excellent teacher and incredibly generous. So it's like, and one of the things I love about you is there's nothing that you hold back. Like they're getting a lot of value, even if they're just following your account over there. So it's meganmariept.com and then meganmarie_PT on social media. What is that, Instagram, or is that Facebook as well? Or is it just Instagram?
Instagram. I mean, I'm on Facebook. I'm mostly on Instagram, though. Yeah. So that's totally fine.
At meganmarie_PT on Instagram. My friend, anything else you want to sort of add, things that, last words, anything that you feel like we should have covered?
No, I mean, other than the fact that this stuff is important, and honestly, just being very intentional and finding your intentions behind your movement is so important because you can really learn to love it if you don't already. And if you already love it, you can be way more effective and efficient based on your goals. So like reach out to someone. You can reach out to me anytime, and I can guide you accordingly. But do it. Take care of your body. I know that you value that too, Jade. So
yeah, and my final thoughts on that are like literally like think about all of us listening to this. I'm 48 now. There's many different age groups here. My age range for men ranges from like 25 to 45, and with women it's like 35 to 55. But at least in that 35 to 55 year range for men and women, like things just aren't the same anymore. And I want to be doing this. I've had a lot of setbacks lately because I didn't pay attention to this kind of stuff, and I'm wanting to get, and I'm still not, honestly, Megan knows, I'm still not paying as much attention to it as I need to. But if we want to stay fit and functional and live this lifestyle over the long run, we have got to pay close attention to the quality of our movement, not just the quantity of our movement. And that is critically important for all of us. And so we better start paying attention to that. So I appreciate you so much, my friend. Thank you for being on the show. And we will talk to all of you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.